Do the Mets have the best lineup in baseball?
When you talk about Lindor and Soto's heating up, we'll talk about him, and Alonso, and Nimmo, and we will talk plenty about Brandon Nimmo in this episode, and Vientos, and McNeil, and Alvarez, and then a Luis Angel Acuna, who had another 3 hits on Monday. And the different skill sets, the different ways these guys get on base, the ability to exude patience at the plate, make opposing pitchers work. I don't think we've seen this Mets lineup reach its max potential yet. I only say that because it's really only been whole for 4 games, but you show me another lineup in Major League Baseball that makes a pitcher work this hard and makes an opposing manager or opposing pitching coach just take a step back or take a seat and take a deep breath and say, where does it end? There is no give up in this Mets lineup, and that's why I think it's one of, if not the best lineups in all of baseball.
Hey all, thank you for meeting us at the Apple, presented by PC Richard & Son. I'm Vito Calise. That's Jonathan Barron. And John, I tweeted this. I'm going to say it to you to start the show. What a bizarre Mets weekend.
Yeah, very, very bizarre. Everything comes out in the wash as even. The Mets split a 4-game series in D.C. I think a lot of Mets fans that maybe hadn't paid too much attention to the offseason the Nationals had or the first 20-somewhat games the Nationals have had now realize that this national team is somewhat of a force to be reckoned with. Definitely a team that is building in the right direction. They made the big Juan Soto trade a couple of years ago. It's paying huge dividends for them. I know the SNY broadcast talked a lot about that with C.J. Abrams and James Wood, both in this lineup, Robert Hassel, Jarlin Sasana also on the way. But yes, this is a good Nationals team. They gave the Mets some troubles. Of course, the Mets led in all 4 games. They wind up winning 2 of them. You could say, just saying, that's what you do on a podcast, you could say the Mets could have left DC with a sweep. They let a couple tough ones get away. But yeah, everything from rain delays and the game starting in a rain delay and the Tart Monster and misplaced tags by C.J. Abrams on, not such great places on the body of Francisco Lindor and so much more. We had a bit of everything, including some thunder in the Mets lineup, Vito.
Bats were alive this weekend. And before we keep going, I do want to ask people to do us a favor because I wanted to tell myself to do this at the top of the show. If you are listening to this podcast, if you like this podcast, please go over to Apple and Spotify. Give us a review, give us a rating. It really makes a big difference. Also, if you're listening along, you want to put up a thing on your story, give us a tag, we'll repost you. But please, those ratings and reviews make a huge difference for us. So please leave us if you can. But John, yes, as I was watching this game, it led to the question that you're probably seeing on the title of this episode right now, which is, do the Mets have the best lineup in baseball?
Well, Vito, the Mets have been whole for only a few games now. Jeff McNeil, Francisco Alvarez, they made their long-awaited returns on Friday night, and they both made immediate impacts. Francisco Alvarez hits the 2-run home run on Saturday, took a hanger that was kind of on the inner half, and showed just how strong he was by putting it over the right field fence. All the offense the Mets would need on Sunday. And then Monday in a 2-0 game, obviously we saw on Sunday that nothing is guaranteed. Jeff McNeil gives the Mets a little bit more breathing room. He hits his first home run of the season, hits it hard over the right center field fence, continuing the trend we saw last year of Jeff pulling the baseball. He had 4 hits in this series. He pulled 2 of them with authority, both of those hard hit balls, including the home run. So 1 through 9, when you talk about Lindor and Soto's heating up, we'll talk about him, and Alonso and Nimmo, and we will talk plenty about Brandon Nimmo in this episode, and Vientos and McNeil and Alvarez, and then a Tyrone Taylor, and then a Luis Angel Acuna, who had another 3 hits on Monday. And the different skill sets, the different ways these guys get on base, the ability to exude patience at the plate, make opposing pitchers work. I don't think we've seen this Mets lineup reach its max potential yet. I only say that because it's really only been whole for 4 games, but you show me another lineup in Major League Baseball that makes a pitcher work this hard and makes an opposing manager or opposing pitching coach just take a step back or take a seat and take a deep breath and say, where does it end? There is no give up in this Mets lineup. And that's why I think it's one of, if not the best lineups in all of baseball.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen Mets teams before where you have a solid 1-4, and then the bottom of the lineup you start to struggle. But even starting with last year, we saw those rallies starting with guys 6 through 9. And I want to now talk about the front of the lineup because Francisco Lindor has turned. If you're watching the game at home, if you're not seated by the time 7:10 hits or 7:08, depending on whatever time the game starts, you might miss Francisco Lindor's first hit. You might miss a home run. You never know. Alvy being able to get off to a hot start, going 4 for 13 over this 4-game series is really promising. Just not needing that time because you got to remember, I mean, this is basically those rehab games are spring training. So Alvy getting off to a hot start, Jeff McNeil getting off to a hot start. Those are such important pieces to this team being a strong contender going into October, and having Luis Torrens be able to bridge the gap from then to now made people forget about Francisco Alvarez. Almost they forgot that Francisco Alvarez is a young 23-year-old catcher who's a top prospect in the sport, can hit for power, can get on base. So it's just when this lineup is hitting, John, it just feels great.
Yeah, it's a very well-balanced lineup. Another guy who you didn't mention is Juan Soto, who had a great weekend in Washington, D.C. Soto was 6 for 16, a couple doubles, 2 walks, 4 of his 6 hits, over 100 miles an hour, including a double, clocked at 113 off the bat. So he continues to put the ball in play. He continues to get on base. Him starting to hit for some extra base hits. We know the power is coming with Juan Soto. So seeing him start to heat up for the Mets to be in the position that they're in, knowing that Juan Soto has been off to the start they're off to, and we've said this before, but we'll say it again, especially now with McNeil and Alvarez back. And I didn't even mention Jesse Winker, who's done a great job for this team in the DH spot. And Brandon Nimmo had struggled a lot before Monday as well. Brandon Nimmo had struggled mightily. I think Brandon would tell you that. But for him to have the day that he had on Monday, there really just is no easy out in this Mets lineup. They make you work. They make the opposing team throw a lot of pitches. They get into opposing teams' bullpens early, and they're really, really successful against hitting velocity, which you see a lot of out of bullpens. So to answer your question again, yeah, this Mets lineup is just a problem for opposing teams. And I know that we keep having these discussions about different facets of the ball club. The starting rotation, no better starting rotation ERA in baseball than the Mets. The bullpen, Sunday notwithstanding, this Mets bullpen has been lights out all season long. You saw it on Saturday. Max Kranick, once again, for the second time in just a couple of days, coming into a game in relief of an injured pitcher, no notice, very short amount of time to warm up, getting the job done, getting out of a jam. We've seen that over and over, just the Met bullpen in general being dominant, Reed Garrett dominant, the Mets throwing a 0 up in Saturday's victory. So you got the starting pitching, which is great. You got the bullpen, which is great. And now we talk about this Mets lineup that I know the Dodgers have a great lineup, although if you watch Dodger baseball a lot, the guy top of the lineup, I'm talking about Shohei Ohtani, he's struggling right now. Max Muncy is struggling right now. This is a baseball season. These things are going to happen. What you want, though, and what we've seen from this Met lineup, Vito, is that, sure, not all 9 guys in the lineup are going to hit at the same time. Monday they did, but that's not the norm. But when you have different guys hot at different times, and you have different guys that can carry a team for a game or 2 games or 3 games, maybe 3 guys are red hot, maybe 4 guys are red hot. But when everyone's taking turns being the guy helping to win games, that's how your offense stays consistent. It can't be boom or bust. It can't be relying on 1 or 2 guys. You got to have a whole lineup of guys that can get it done and win you ball games on any nights. And we talked about that before the season started, and we're talking about it right now because it's true. And that's why this is the first team in Major League Baseball to 20 victories. I just got really pumped up. If you guys are listening or watching, my tone just changed immensely. I don't know what happened. I'm going to be honest. Vito, you know this. I've been horizontal for the last 72 hours.
That's why I was so surprised.
I've been sick as a dog. I got my extra ibuprofen right here. I popped one right before we got going, about 45 minutes before. Just to what? I can't say I have extra strength ibuprofen.
No, I'm laughing because I've known you for a few years now, and I'm not I've known you for a few years, and even with the run this team went on last year, I don't think I've ever seen you this fired up about the Mets.
I don't know. I don't know what got into me. I'm fired up. I am fired up, and we're about to have one heck of a series at Citi Field this weekend. But it kind of just dawned on me as I was talking that I know last year we said, is this the best team since 2015? And, I think the true best Mets team of our lifetime, especially offense, was 06. when you had
Yeah.
Jose Valentin in the 8 spot. Of course, pitchers were still hitting in those days, hitting 18 home runs. When Luis Angel Acuna is hitting 9th, and you've got, today Brandon Nimmo hit 6th. And I didn't look at this. I probably should have. I'm actually going to put my mic down. It's going to be your turn to go on a little bit of a rant. I want to look up how many times a guy has had 9 RBI out of the 6th spot in the lineup. I bet you it's not often. We have all sorts of facts and fun figures about Brandon Nimmo. I just thought about that one. But yeah, this team is insane. This team is insane. And they've got so much down in the minor leagues. Every single day, there's something to be excited about. I don't know what to do with myself sometimes.
Look, you brought up before that you thought that Brandon Nimmo himself would say he was struggling to start the year. And Brandon Nimmo actually did say that himself. He went on SNY right after the game, and he said it's been a tough start for him, but he actually feels great right now. He said even on Sunday's game, even though he didn't get a hit, he felt like he was putting more contact on the ball. And John, because you're gearing up to bring up some facts about this moment from Monday, I think this is the perfect time to bring up the That's Electric moment of the game presented by PC Richard & Son. So without a doubt, not even a question, the top moment of this series was Brandon Nimmo breaking a Mets franchise record of 9 RBI in a game, a record he broke by Carlos Delgado in 2008 at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, and that timing works perfectly because I just got the answer. Brandon Nimmo is the 6th player in Major League history to have at least 9 runs batted in out of the 6th spot in the lineup. That is it. There have been 6 guys. He is now the 6th guy to do this. You mentioned how he tied Carlos Delgado's franchise record for RBI in a single game. He is one of 12 guys in Major League history with at least 2 homers, 9 RBI, 4 hits, and 4 runs scored in a game. We can go on and on. Brandon Nimmo had a legendary day at Nationals Park, the kind of day that we will talk about forever and ever. And you know what? I think it was the kind of coming out situation that Brandon needed. We know that Brandon is a great hitter. We know he's probably been pressing. For Carlos Mendoza to have the luxury to move Brandon down in the lineup, put him in the 6th spot, take a little pressure off the guy. Hey, just go out and hit. Go see the ball and go hit the ball. And for him to mash the way he did when guys were coming up, what an afternoon for Brandon Nimmo, who, like you said, makes Mets history, becomes the 6th player in MLB history with a 9 spot in the RBI column out of the 6th hole. If that doesn't speak to how deep this Mets lineup is, I don't know what is. And if that's not electric, I don't know what is. What a job by Brandon Nimmo on Monday.
John, you said it, man. I was watching the end of this game, and especially when it was like when Jose Ureno was out there and it was getting up to he gave up 5 runs in the 8th inning, and this game was just getting weird. And I'm not saying there was any point where I thought the Mets were going to give up the lead, but it was just turning more and more into this game that I was like, I don't think I'll ever forget sitting at home on a Monday watching this just ridiculous game and a ridiculous 4-game series, because you brought up some of the moments. I mean, dude, Ahmed Rosario, a former Mets #1 prospect, was the position pitcher to end the game. And I don't know if you would agree or disagree. I thought probably the worst position pitchers we've seen.
You mentioned Jose Urena first. Congratulations are in order. Jose Urena picked up his first save as a New York Met today.
And I have a prediction, John. I said this to Hunter, and I'm going to say it to you. Okay. I think the Mets this year will break a franchise record for most players to complete a save in a season.
They had a lot a couple years ago.
I know, but I'm telling you,
last year.
I think it's going to be a really weird saves by committee year. Not because of Edwin Diaz for any reason, just a lot of guys that they trust. You've seen different guys already get the opportunity. I mean, we saw Brazaban get the 3-inning save. We've seen Areno get the 3-inning save. We saw Stanek get 1 save. So I just think it's
get a save at some point. He almost did in that game against the Phillies. I think it was the Monday game against Philly.
Yeah. So I really, truly believe that we are going to see that record break this year as well.
Speaking of saves, let's talk about the 9th inning on Saturday. And when Edwin Diaz came into that game, did eventually pick up the save, but ran into a little bit of trouble. And Francisco Alvarez popped out from behind the dish and came out to talk to Edwin Diaz and settle him down. And the last time you and I spoke after the completion of Wednesday's game, the sweep against the Phillies, by the way, shout out everybody who joined us for that episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We appreciate all you great listeners tuning in. We talked about the leadership, especially at such a young age, for Francisco Alvarez, who's only 23 years old, who has not been a major league catcher for that long. And we know that catcher is one of, if not the most taxing positions on the body, but also most important from a leadership position because, as they say, when you're young, you first get into baseball and you're growing up, the catcher controls the game. The catcher controls everything, the speed, the tempo, a lot of the positioning, obviously, pitch call, pitch sequences, and all that sort of stuff. For Francisco Alvarez to pop up, he noticed that Edwin Diaz might have been overthrowing a bit. Go out to the mound and talk to him. So you've got an incredible leader in Francisco Lindor. We've seen him do this before. And an incredible leader behind the plate at 23 years old, Francisco Alvarez, to stop the game, ask for time, walk the baseball back to the mound, and talk to his all-star closer and get him back on track. And Edwin Diaz winds up striking the side, completing the save. What more can you say about Francisco Alvarez, who is just 23 years old, who had a great day, a great series at bat after coming back, nabbed a would-be base stealer on Friday night, not even close, by the way. People are like, oh, what if Luis Torrens and his arm are so... Luis Torrens is great at controlling the running game. Hayden Senga did a great job controlling the running game. Francisco Alvarez is pretty good at controlling the running game also. The Mets have, how could you argue, the best now trio, really, when you include Senga, what we saw from him defensively, trio of catchers when it comes to throwing out would-be base stealers. Francisco Alvarez is such a weapon for this Mets team, but not only with his bat and not only with his arm, but his leadership and his field general ability. And it was all on display where he calmed Edwin Diaz down and helped Diaz get through that inning to not just preserve the Mets win, to get a save, but also to preserve another shutout for the Mets, which has been seemingly almost every 3 games at this point.
Yeah, and we saw last year that you brought up how Francisco Lindor, Edwin Diaz had said Francisco Lindor had come over to him a bunch throughout the year to give him those words of encouragement because we found out last year, Edwin Diaz randomly forgets that he could throw 98, 99, and he needs somebody to come over and remind him of that. But yeah, no, Francisco Alvarez's leadership on the field is the reason why, and we spoke to him about this in the interview that was aired the other day, the reason he became the preferred catcher for guys like Verlander and Scherzer at such a young age, because he just knows how to call a game. And that's not discrediting anything else, because we also heard Griffin Canning say how close he's got with Luis Torrens and how Luis Torrens and him have a really good chemistry out there. So yeah, the Mets just have a great arsenal of catchers right now. And to go with those catchers, the pitching, John, you brought it up before, but the Mets lead all of baseball in ERA right now. And this rotation, every single night somebody goes out there, you feel like you're going to see a dominant performance. And I think we should start off with Tylor Megill and his 9 strikeouts, because Tylor Megill, I'm not going to lie to you, John. I thought 2 innings into that game, I said to myself, I thought this was going to be the game that Tylor Megill threw a no-hitter. He looked untouchable in the first 2. I know it's a crazy thing to say that early, but I think me and you have talked about this before, about how DeGrom had this game in 21 or 22, with the one where he overswung and got hurt early in the game and left, where he was just so on point that it felt like if there was going to be a night, it was that night. I felt like that early on with Tylor.
The biggest thing for Tylor was that he was pumping strikes. And yeah, you look up, he only had 1 hit allowed at a certain point. I think it was through 5 or 6 innings. Now, I know a lot of New York was watching another game at that time, and I don't blame you, because I had the dual screen going as well. The basketball game was a crazy game. Go Knicks! I'm back on the Knick bandwagon for now, and I'm allowed to be. I don't care what anyone says. I could root for who I want to root for, and I could change my mind when I want to change my mind. But right now, go Knicks! But yeah, Megill was throwing strike 1. And I know Griffin Canning told us about that strike 1 game the guys play. And we know that t-shirt that we've seen some of the pitchers wear about throwing strikes and how important throwing strikes is. Tylor was living up to that t-shirt. Look, he just looks like a different guy. He just looks confident. Strike 1 is such an important pitch. I believe Tom Seaver was the one who not coined the phrase, but said famously, the most important pitch in baseball is strike 1. And for Tylor, who has such an array, such a deep arsenal of pitches, and for a guy who has a pitch, especially the spork ball that he showed us, and I'm going to bring it up again, showing us how wide he can split his index and his middle finger on the baseball, and him telling us that's not a strike pitch. He can't throw that pitch in a 2-1 count. He's got to be ahead of the count for that pitch to be thrown and for it to be effective. Otherwise, opposing hitters are going to spit on it. But for me, you mentioned the 9 strikeouts. That comes after his 10 strikeout performance against the Phillies last week. In that performance against Philadelphia, he walked 4, and that's why he wasn't able to complete 6 innings. He only walked 1 batter on Sunday against the Nationals. That's where it's at. If Tylor Megill can keep that number, that walk number at 2, 1, in a perfect world, 0, but I get it, 1 or 2, it's fine, we live with that. Tylor Megill is one of the better pitchers in the National League. That's why he's got a sub-2 ERA through this point. He continues to get stronger. I think he continues to learn. I think he continues to learn more about himself. I think that this whole rotation, just like last year, the camaraderie in that pitcher's room, we know these guys talk. We know these guys are giving notes. They're paying attention. They're coaching. And we know that the Mets have the best pitching coach in all of baseball, one of the best pitching front offices, if you know what I mean, when it comes to Eric Yeagers and just the whole organization and their philosophy on pitching, the technology they're using. I think Tylor Megill is an exact example of how all of those things translate to strikes, to strikeouts, to outs, and eventually wins on the diamond. Tylor Megill has been absolutely incredible. Another great start for him on Sunday. It's a shame he didn't get the victory. But man, every time he takes the ball, you expect dominance by Tylor Megill.
Everybody made the baby DeGrom comparisons when he had that opening day start. And he had a Jacob DeGrom start.
He did. And so when everyone was making those comparisons with Tylor back in 2022, he was pumping 97, 98, 99 consistently. And I don't want to say he was overthrowing, but I think that was I'm going to show them how hard I can throw type situation. And yes, we know Tylor has that ability. Tall glass of water, strong guy, imposing figure on the mound. But when I say I think he continues to learn, you can live with 95, 96 with a nasty slider, a nasty changeup, that spork ball, a cutter, a sweeper. It doesn't always need to be max effort on every single pitch. There's throwers and there's pitchers, and I think Tylor Megill is both now at this point, and that's why he is sporting one of the lowest earned run averages in all of baseball and a FIP to go along with it because the guy doesn't allow home runs either.
This whole staff barely allows home runs. Let's move on. Talk about the Clay Holmes start in a weird game, a game with 2 rain delays in the first hour. And that impacted Clay Holmes' ability to probably go longer into that game. He said it was a weird situation, but also the broadcast made a good note that being somebody coming from being a reliever, being ready to kind of like get himself ready to go on short notice and a quicker turnaround kind of like prepares him even better for most guys in a situation like that. But Clay Holmes, 12 ground balls, dude, only 70 pitches to get through 5 innings of work. And we're just seeing more and more that the Clay Holmes experiment is not an experiment. It's a fact.
Oh, it's not an experiment whatsoever. Clay Holmes is dominant, and let's be honest. A lot of other teams misread the situation when it comes to Clay Holmes, and that's their problem, and it's the Mets' benefit. And I don't want to get into them and any other team's possible closer issues that they're experiencing right now, but Clay Holmes, like you mentioned, 17 ground balls, has not allowed a single home run this season, had to deal with the game starting, and then quickly after he got an out, the game was paused, and he comes back out there, still completes 5 innings on 70 pitches. In some ways, could be a blessing in disguise because he wasn't overexerted, and these pitches and these innings, they add up. It's not like the Mets had a massive lead. They were able to just have the luxury of taking him out, but Mendy and Clay Holmes after the game said it probably was the right decision to get him out when they did. But just another great start for Clay Holmes, who outside of one start against the Marlins where he allowed 4 runs, but I think still struck out a career-high 10 batters in that game, the game that was changed to 4 o'clock from 7 o'clock. And some of those runs, it was, guys that he left on base, and there was a wind-aided home run allowed by Huáscar Brazaban. Clay Holmes has been money for the Mets. He's been absolutely money. This front office was on the money when they targeted Clay Holmes as a starter. We know that Clay Holmes had been talking about and thinking about and targeting doing this. He's always been a great pitcher. He's always had great stuff, no matter what metric you want to look at from his time as a reliever, going back to his days in Pittsburgh. This guy has had some of the nastiest stuff in baseball. You add the kick change. He has that ability to just read the game and understand situations and mix and match. He's so smart. Everyone you talk to about him says that. You talk to him yourself. You pick it up immediately. The Mets have an absolute gem on their hands in Clay Holmes, and every time he goes out there and takes the ball, you feel like the Mets are going to win, but you could say that about any of these starting pitchers, Vito.
I mean, 100%, dude. When Griffin Canning was going out there today, I just was like, there's going to be an absolute dog on the mound. And I do think Griffin Canning is the kind of guy who's cerebral, just like every other pitcher in this rotation. But I really like Griffin Canning going on like a game 3 or a game 4 when he's gotten a chance to look at all the at bats and kind of take note of what he's going up against. And I think you saw a really calculated effort and a guy who got out of multiple jams where, I mean, he had his back up against the wall. I mean, what was it? I think 3 straight innings where he had runners on first and second, and just was constantly able to wiggle his way out of everything. So just Griffin Canning, I mean, how can the results speak for themselves? And another W by the Mets pitching lab.
Yeah, a guy that is comfortable pitching out of the stretch, pitching out of the windup, pitching with runners on base, changing up the signs. Not everyone is so comfortable pitching with runners on base. Those pitches become higher intensity. Those are high leverage pitches every time you're throwing, especially with runners in scoring position. And Griffin Canning, each time he's been in that situation, has been equal to the task. Perhaps the biggest at bat he's faced all year long to this point was the one that we talked about in our last episode, last Tuesday against the Phillies. Nick Castellanos, bases loaded, threw him 3 pitches nowhere near the strike zone. He read that Castellanos was up there seeing dead red no matter what. He was swinging the bat, threw him 3 pitches out of the strike zone, got him to bite 3 times out of a bases loaded jam. The changeup, the slider. We keep talking about how the Mets' philosophy is, hey, if a guy has a trick, not a trick, but a pitch, we'll call it a trick. That works and keeps working. Guess what? Keep using that trick until it's not working anymore. And the slider and the changeup, those are Griffin Canning's 2 best pitches. And when he is having success with them, his 4-seam fastball that got him into trouble last year with the Angels, it plays a whole lot more effectively than when he's predominantly 4-seam fastball, which is a traditional way of going about pitching, right? Usually guys are 40%, maybe some 50% 4-seamer, and you work backwards off of that. With Griffin Canning, it's the opposite. He's mixing his pitches well. He's throwing that changeup more. He's throwing that slider more. On Monday afternoon, 4 of his 5 strikeouts came with the changeup, especially to lefties. A devastating pitch to lefties. He approaches lefties and righties different, what you like to see. It's not one size fits all. That's game planning. That's good leadership behind the dish. That's good leadership before the start even happens, before the day even begins. Going in, having a plan, and executing upon that plan. Griffin Canning was a high draft pick. This is no 20th round pick. Griffin Canning was a 2nd round pick out of UCLA, a great baseball program for a reason. He's been a really good starter in Major League Baseball. I think he was a guy, honestly, Vito, who needed a bit of a change of scenery. He had been with the Angels for a long time. He comes to New York. We talked with him. You guys heard that episode on Monday. If you haven't, please check it out on the Mets YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Griffin Canning, another absolute steal by the Mets. And Vito, in his 6 starts, he has allowed 2 runs or fewer in 5 of them. So another guy, just like Clay Holmes, whenever he takes the ball, you expect the Mets to win.
And that leaves us one last person to talk about, one last game to really talk about that we haven't hit at all because it feels like it was a year ago right now. But Kodai Senga takes the mound Friday night in the weirdest game of a weird series. A game that was on its path to be an all-time Mets classic, was reminding me of that comeback in St. Louis a few years ago, that like first one in 2022, where you really saw that 22 team become like a we always rally, we never give up team. But like that was, you had the triple play that was just bizarre. And I say triple play in quotes if you're not watching. I'm giving air quotes right now because we all saw the footage. It was not a triple play. Some weird moments that just led to an unfortunate loss, but Kodai Senga was dominant once again. We said this last week. We'll say it again this week, and we'll probably say it again next week. Kodai Senga is making a really clear case early on for why he might be getting Cy Young votes later in the year.
Yeah, my favorite thing about Kodai, I mentioned this about Megill and the 1 walk from his last start. Kodai has not issued more than 2 walks in any of his starts, and his walk rate is at 8%. And when he first came to the major leagues in 2023, he struggled with the base on ball a little bit. That was kind of his bugaboo, was issuing free passes, and it has not been that case whatsoever. Obviously the Brandon Nimmo mental error, which Brandon took full credit for, and you love accountability, that hurt Kodai. He had a runner on second instead of a runner on first, and then Jose Tena singled him in. The Mets are down, allows 1 more run, but once again, I mean, at this point, Kodai Senga has emerged as the quote unquote number 1. We feel confident with all starting pitchers whenever they go out and take the mound for the Mets. But
you won't say that word. You hate that word.
No, because what is the definition of it? Honestly, like what is the definition of it? The starting pitchers today in baseball, they'll go two times through the order, maybe three times through the order, and then they're out. And you need your bullpen to come through. You need your bullpen to be great for you. But Kodai Senga, Vito, his next start is going to be against the Diamondbacks. I believe he is slated to pitch on Thursday. The Mets have not announced the starter for Wednesday yet, by the way. So we'll see what the plan is there. Of course, the Mets had the off day on Thursday between Peterson and Senga. So I'm not sure what the plan is. The Mets will announce that. We'll all find out together. But two of Kodai's best starts, and I would say perhaps his first true dominant start in the major leagues, came, if you recall, in Arizona on July 5th, 2023. And if you know what I'm talking about, that is the night that Francisco Alvarez hit the game-tying solo home run against Andrew Chafin in the ninth inning. Remember when Ali turned around, rounding the bases, celebrating with his teammates? Well, Kodai Senga, he started that game. And Kodai was downright brilliant, struck out 12, walked only 1. And in September of that season, Diamondbacks fighting for a playoff spot, the Mets out of it. Kodai had another great start. He struck out 10 and walked only 2 batters. So 2 of his best starts have come against the Diamondbacks. That's who he's going to face next. A very good Diamondback team. We'll talk about that in a bit. But we talked about this last year, that there wasn't that big, sexy, flashy name in the rotation, right? There also wasn't the name in the rotation, and I'm not going to mention names of years past because there's no need to, although I know you love to slander Jared Eichhoff. I'm not going to do that, Jared Eichhoff. Don't worry about it. There is and has not been a guy in the David Stearns regime who, when you see his name on the probables list, you're like, well, on to tomorrow. That's not a thing here. And it's been the case for a while. And that's why I don't care for the term ace. Is it nice to have a Paul Skeens? Yeah, it's nice to have a Paul Skeens. Is it nice to have Yoshinobu Yamamoto? Those two just faced off on Friday night against each other, which is why I mentioned Yamamoto. Sure, that's nice. Is it nice to have Hunter Green? Heck yeah, it's nice to have Hunter Green.
Are you just going to name number ones?
I'm naming some good pitchers. But what's more important? Having that one guy atop the rotation and then 3, 4, 5 guys behind him who you don't feel that good about, because you got to throw everybody. Your one guy's not going more than once every 4 or 5 days. Or is it more important to have a plethora of guys that no matter what day of the week it is, you got a guy that you truly believe you can win in, who's going to get you 5, 6 innings, who's going to give your offense a chance to win a ball game, who's going to hand it over to the bullpen with a lead intact. That's what it's all about. And the Mets, since last year, they've had that. So, yeah, they might not have had the DeGrom, the Scherzer, the Verlander, the name brands that people love to cling to. Forget it. It's not about that. It's about the depth. It's about the quality, the quantity of quality. Some people say quality or quality, quantity or quality. No. It's the quality and it's the quantity of the quality. Say that 15 times fast. That's what the Mets have. That's what this Mets team has. That's why they're the only team with 20 wins, Vito.
And we brought this up last year. I mean, we brought this up early in this season as well. You look at the Dodgers last year, they were winning. They won the World Series on a team where they had to play multiple playoff games. They had to play World Series with bullpen games. And which is crazy to say because they are a team that has, like, on paper, like 5 of your not favorite terms. But the fact is sometimes those guys fall by the wayside. And guess what? When you have depth like the Dodgers, or you have depth like the Mets have built over the last few years, you're protected in a situation like that. We said it before this year. The amount of people saying the Mets didn't have pitching, the Mets' biggest problem was pitching this year. Me and you both said, no, it's a similar situation to last year. The amount of people I had to tell, no, you're looking at this all wrong. I felt even better about the pitching this year than I did last year, and I felt great both years. John, would you like to get into a silly topic now?
Yeah. What is it? It's 8:09. I try to be asleep by 10-ish. I'm really trying to be healthy for tomorrow. But yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the big meme on Twitter this weekend, I don't even know if you call this a meme at this point, but the conversation on Twitter over the weekend was, could 100 people take on a gorilla? I decided, let's make it Metsy for Meet at the Apple. So I asked fans on Twitter who they would put into a 100-person battle against a gorilla. And I mean, John, Do you want to just guess some of the names people said? And I can tell you if they made the list? We're not going to name all 100. That would be crazy.
I mean, there's a player in Mets history whose nickname was literally King Kong, Dave Kingman.
Okay, Dave Kingman, strong guy. So you think you want him in there for the gorilla battle. Now, what is your reasoning behind him for the gorilla battle?
He was one of the best power hitters of his time and in Mets history.
He doesn't have a bat here,
and
just to be
his
clear.
nickname was King Kong. And I'm only 33 years old and I'm saying this. I'm sure you had someone in their 50s or 60s reply to you. Did no one say King Kong? I haven't
Nobody
looked
said
yet.
no. Nobody said Dave Kingman, but I'll tell you mine so we can move on. I said Yoenis Cespedes because he does have experience with wild animals. Now, somebody responded and said he lost that fight, but my point, that's still game experience. Like, that's like what we talked about in the last episode where Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos, they were on the playoff roster. They got to see what it was like in 2022. They might not have played a lot. That team might have gotten eliminated in the first round, but that's still important experience to take you into that battle. So I think Yoenis Cespedes riding horses, battling boars, I mean, that's going to help.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. All right, let me think of another one.
Brendan McKeon gave one.
Brendan McKeon. What did Brendan McKeon chime in with?
The bad dude.
John Stearns. And he used to say the monster's out of the cage. So about Mike Piazza. Yeah. That was his phrase as Mets hitting bench coach. Yeah, bench coach.
Another person did. You brought up Mike Piazza. Somebody did say Mike Piazza, but they did give a qualifier and said Mike Piazza, but the gorilla would need to be wearing a Guillermo Mota mask.
Turk Wendell with his shark necklace.
Turk Wendell got brought up more than anybody else. Turk Wendell by far led the fan vote for who could beat up a gorilla.
All right, that makes sense. Had a rubber arm.
There's two recent ones that I feel like are pretty obvious if you think into the psyche of a Mets fan.
What about Syndergaard? I mean, Syndergaard was tall and strong.
Yes, there was a tweet with a picture of Noah Syndergaard saying his animal riding partner could take some as well.
How about Tommy Pham?
That's who I was waiting. That's when I said there was two recent people. One, and I think they're obvious. Tommy Pham, sorceress to the Mets at Metsies TM. Not only did they say that Tommy Pham would be one, but they actually gave a whole story of like how they think it would go down.
How about Pete Alonso?
Pete Alonso, yes. There was a tweet from at rlav88 polar bear over a silverback gorilla. So Ryan over here is saying that he thinks Pete Alonso himself could just beat up the gorilla. I think that's a tough thing to do, but I get what they're thinking.
I got one.
Go.
Nolan Ryan.
Nolan Ryan did not make the list. Nobody said Nolan Ryan.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't assimilate him as a Met, but as we know, he was a Met. And as we know, Nolan Ryan, one tough SOB. So yeah, I'd say Nolan Ryan has to be on there.
Nadia at Dom Smith Trooper said Mo Vaughn.
Okay. Kevin Mitchell.
Kevin Mitchell did get a shout out, which I thought another you had to say Kevin Mitchell. At Tyler, yep. At K Harrington 3125, Tyler Fitzgerald said that. Casey, the bench is clear, said Willie Mays. They said, I firmly believe that man can do anything.
How about Starling Marte?
Starling Marte didn't make the list, and I really thought he should. Starling Marte is an absolute unit, probably one of the strongest Mets of all time.
Starling Marte.
Yeah, see? Unit.
The wrong use of the word unit. He's not a unit. No. He's not a unit.
All right, if you're listening to this, if you've made it this far into the gorilla debate, which
he's not a unit.
How do
he's jacked.
Below, how do you describe somebody as a unit? Can just a jacked dude, can a totally strong buff dude, can a strong king be a unit? Or does it have to be like a chunky boy like John thinks? It can't be just somebody absolutely ripped.
I don't think it means that. I just don't think it always has the best connotation. That's all.
So
okay, how about Chris? How about pitcher Chris Young? 6'10", smart guy. Probably knows where to hit that gorilla. The anatomy of the gorilla.
Did not get a shout out here, but similar, John Roush did. I think similar thinking, John Roush got a listing on here for the gorilla fight.
That's nice. You know what? I like that Mets fans are being nice. That's good. All All right. Well, I mean, if anyone else has any other good, I think we've covered a nice
Yeah, I
chunk
mean,
of them.
we've done a lot. If you want to get in the comments below, go to my tweet, name some people that you think. At Mets Junior 69, put the bad guy from Rookie of the Year in there. I said that counts.
Okay.
He did wear a Mets uniform, so I'm going to put it in. But this reminds me of the conversation we had last year where actually Mets Junior 69 called in, left a voicemail, and asked if all the Mets memes from last year got into a giant battle royale, who would win?
You did say it's time for some wacky stuff, so you were not lying.
That was it. Look, I had a question. I had to get it out there. Oh, lastly, the second most mentioned person, Daniel Vogelback.
I believe the last Met to hit a grand slam in Washington, D.C. before Brandon Nimmo on Monday.
That's an exciting trivia fact.
And Vogie did so during a 4 o'clock getaway day game as well. So there you go. I don't know if I mentioned this top of the show. Did I mention the Mets win-loss record in games following a loss this year?
You did. 8-1.
I want to bring that back. The Mets are 8-1 this season in games following a loss. And to do that, to come back the way they did today, score 2 runs right out of the chute in the first inning after suffering a loss on Sunday. And as I was in bed, fighting my fever, scrolling Twitter, and if I felt like I was having a body meltdown, the collective meltdown I was witnessing on Mets Twitter for a team that at the time was 19-9 and 4.5 games up in the division. And for them to come back and ho-hum, throw up a 15 spot, nothing phases this team. And I know that a lot of people were worried after last year into this year and some changes. And, is it the same team? Can they have the same magic? Will they have the same resolve? Number one, we've seen the resolve. Even though they don't win on Friday, they still come back from a 3-0 deficit. We've seen them come back. They clearly had that same never say die attitude. Number two, for them to bounce back after yesterday's loss, like we saw last year. The game where Edwin Diaz, I think, let one get away in Arizona, the grand slam. The Mets come back the next day. That was, I think, the 7th or 8th time the season was over. And the Mets come back the next day and they win that thriller in Arizona, the Iglesias hit up the middle, the day that you and I were in, I believe, not Scranton, but Lehigh Valley.
Talking to Sproat.
Yep. This team gets punched in the face and they bounce back. And I think at this point, yes, there are some different names. I think at this point, it's fair to say there's some common denominators, and it's the manager and it's his staff. Carlos Mendoza and John Gibbons and Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes and Jose Rosado and Eric Lengill and, of course, Jeremy Hefner and Danny Barnes, and the list goes on. Antoine Richardson, Mike Sarbaugh, Glenn Sherlock, now Desi Juchel. I think we named all of them.
Yeah.
That's the common denominator between last year and this year after a tough loss, keeping these guys even keel. They're all professionals. We know that. These guys wake up the next day. That's the beauty of baseball, right? If this is an NFL game and you blow one like the Mets did on Sunday, you got to wait at least 4 days, in most cases a week, to make up for it. In the NBA or the NHL, you're probably waiting at least 2 days, maybe 3, maybe longer. The beauty of baseball is Mets lose that game, ends about 5 o'clock. Misery ensues. Sky is falling. Guess what? They got going at 4 p.m. the next day. They were out there taking BP at like 1 p.m., forgetting about it. Next thing you know, they're up 2-0 in the first. Then Jeff McNeil's hitting a home run against Trevor Williams. And then Nimmo hits a 3-run shot. And then he hits a grand slam. And guess what? Everyone forgot about all the pain, the temporary pain we felt on Sunday, April 27th. That's the beautiful thing about baseball. That's the beautiful thing about a resilient team like these Mets are.
And let's put it into perspective too. Think of how great everybody feels right now. Imagine if they would have won the first 2 games and then lost the second 2 games. You'd feel terrible. But because they won the final game, things just feel that much better. And that's part of the beauty of baseball. Like you said, they play every day. And Hunter, the kidcasting without even listening, just sent us a stat that I want to read. From OptaStats, the Mets starting pitchers have now allowed 4 or fewer runs in each of their first 29 games to begin the season, the longest streak by an NL team to begin a season in the modern era since 1901. Imagine you told somebody that in March, that the Mets would be at this point ending April.
And that's the perfect support nugget to support what I was saying. They do not have a guy who's taking the ball and you look up and it's the third inning and the game is over. There just isn't that guy on this staff. Everyone is steady. Everyone is quality. Every time the Mets send a starter out there, you feel like they have a chance to win. I'd rather have that 12 times out of 10 instead of a big name, fancy ace, and a bunch of garbage behind it. The Mets are the opposite of that. They're deep, and it goes even deeper with Montas now ramping up and Manaea's throwing, and we see another 9 strikeout performance by Tidwell and Brandon Sproat, and Jonah Tong in Double-A had one of his best starts of the season, and the Mets made a lot of promotions a couple days ago, guys moving up from Low-A to Brooklyn. We see
Get
Nolan
to Brooklyn.
McClain off to the great start.
Brooklyn is stacked right now, John. People got to get to
we
Brooklyn.
See Ramon Gomez catching the attention of the baseball world, playing for the St.
sports
Lucie
world.
Mets. The sports world throwing 104.5. That's Ben Joyce. That's Mason Miller type stuff. So this organization is rich with arms, and that's what you need. You mentioned the Dodgers and how they were able to overcome last year. Losses in the rotation. Did Tyler Glasnow pitch in the World Series? No, I didn't. Did they have Roki Sasaki at that time? No. Didn't have Roki. Did they go a long time without Yoshinobu Yamamoto last year? Yeah. Yeah, they did. He was hurt for a while. Did they have to acquire Jack Flaherty at the deadline and then have him make a bunch of big starts? Yeah. Yeah, that happened. And did they have to bullpen a bunch of games? Although, when you have a good bullpen, it's not a bad thing, but it's not the necessary preferred outcome. Yeah, they did. But they were able to do that because of the quality that they have and the depth and the quantity. The quality of quantity and the quantity of quality. Now they got Dustin May back. They signed Blake Snell, although he's hurt now. They're dealing with that. And Glasnow went down last night. Between innings, was warming up and felt something in his shoulder. And guess what? They're going to be fine. Why? Because they have a quantity of quality.
What is this? Meet at the bobblehead statue outside Dodger Stadium?
No, but I think that the Mets and the Dodgers are...
It's the vision. Look, we know. We all know Steve Cohen, what he said.
No, but I think that they're 1 and they're 1A. And Steve Cohen said Dodgers East, and it's become Dodgers East because they have depth and they have star power. I mean, we saw them meet in the NLCS last year. I don't think anyone should be surprised if we see that many, many more times in the future, in the near future years, because not only are they good now, but they're both positioned to be good for a long time. You know, some teams right now have guys that are on expiring contracts who in 2026, 2027, it might not be the case, and these teams might not have the means to retain that talent. I'm not going to throw names out there. I'm just saying that could happen in some places. Teams right now that are having success, they've got some UFA, impending free agents. UFA is a hockey term. We don't have to say UFA here on Meet at the Apple. We're not talking hockey. Hockey season's over as far as we know it in the tri-state area, unless our Devils can come back from 3-1 down, which we'll see. But yeah, the Mets and the Dodgers, this is going to be like Knicks Bulls in the mid 90s or Pistons Bulls in the late 80s, early 90s. That's what this is.
Well, John, I think it's time to wrap this episode up, and I want to leave with one note. I saw on Twitter some people saying before Brandon Nimmo had the explosion of let's give Brandon Nimmo a standing ovation on his first at bat back at Citi Field. I still think that should be the case. I think he deserves it for the record he broke, and I also think he deserves it to have that support from the fans to be like, hey, let's carry this through. Let's carry that incredible performance through this series against the Diamondbacks. Find your swing. Let's keep things rolling. So I would love to see fans give Brandon Nimmo the honor of the standing ovation on that first at bat. But just want to remind you guys to subscribe on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also follow us on Twitter at Vito Calise, at JMB9191. Please give us those 5-star reviews. It means a lot to us. The more times it happens, the better it does for us. It makes us look good. We would really appreciate that support. Throw us a tweet, throw us an IG story, tag us if you're listening to the episode. And remember, this is Meet at the Apple, presented by PC Richard & Son.
That's right, Vito. And before we wrap up, just a quick reminder, we want you all to head over to your local PC Richard & Son this week, which are local, they're family owned, and we trust them to have the guaranteed lowest prices and the most friendly, knowledgeable staff for appliances, TVs, electronics, maybe some headphones. You want to listen to Meet at the Apple in that crystal clear audio. Vito's got a beautiful podcast voice. Me, you make the decision for yourself. You can get that there too. A mattress, whatever you need. Get yourself to PC Richard & Son. They are the company you can trust. They've got the longevity. They've got the goods since 1903.
All right, guys. Thanks for meeting us at the Apple. We'll see you again next time.